We're back with another episode, the last one actually of today, with Katie Mendez from Built to Raise. And I'm really excited to have this conversation because I think a lot of times we forget about the development folks, the folks that are responsible for fundraising, for bringing in the dollars, making sure that impact is matched to the money that is being brought in. And Katie, you're the most perfect person to talk about this. Will you do a little introduction of yourself and then we'll just see where this conversation goes?
Yes, thank you, Naomi. So I'm Katie Mendez. My company is Built to Raise. I'm based in St. Louis, and I work with organizations mostly as an interim director of development. So if there's been a fundraising leadership transition, I step in. It's largely with mid-size, some smaller organizations, but mostly mid-size. And then also supporting individual giving growth. So if it's not really getting traction, it's trying to figure out what's going wrong and coming alongside the team to help grow that, which has been a hot topic in the last 18 months, especially. So, but yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. Naomi and I were just in the waiting room, and I was like, these points, they're relative to fundraising, is what I'm going to go over specifically, but they really can go across a lot of departments because the principle of them, I think, really nonprofits need to be thinking about. And I think as I was pulling these together, what I was realizing is, we're talking about transitions today, but when you do some of these things well, especially in fundraising, when there's so much turnover in leadership all the time, these actually create a culture where people want to stay. So it's like you can capture some of these things now. And yes, it will prepare you for the inevitable transitions that will happen, but I really think that it will strengthen operations and program and just your team, the way the team feels and works together so much. So,
and one of the things before you jump into, Katie, I've been thinking a lot about is when we do practices like leaving well, succession planning, documentation, all of those things, it also not only does it impact your organization right now, but if we are all in the mission of wanting to improve our world, that also means our team. And so you're improving your team's capacity and resilience around this as well for wherever they go in the future. So I just want to point that out too, that it's the long game. Any of the actions that you might learn from Katie today are going to impact your organization for many ripples to come.
Yeah, that's always the hope, right? That this isn't just a one-time thing, that this is long-term impact. So, so today you probably saw on the headline, it's 3 things. So I've got kind of 3 main questions for you to start to look at your fundraising program and where it is now. And the first one is about relationships and who holds those relationships with most or with your major donors. And the question or the answer should really be they're shared. Because what I've seen in organizations where they're more fragile is that one person holds them. And that could either be the director of development, who's really that point person, or I've also seen it with the executive director. So it really can go in both places. I've even seen it with board members that sometimes want to hold those too tightly. And I think most often it's in a spirit of good intent. But I think what the ripple of what happens there is that obviously you're not prepared for transitions, but I've seen it create like fear and anxiety among staff because they feel like they can't talk to that person because one person has to be the point person for that relationship. But also what happens is that the donors don't get that perspective across the institution to be able to see the work that's happening and create that web that really ties them to the mission and not just the individual. Because this is where it's a tricky one, because fundraising is about relationships, but it's not just that one-to-one. It can't ever be that. It really has to be multi-pronged. So I don't know. I'm sure you've seen this too, Naomi. I don't know if you want to chime in on this from your ED perspective.
Yeah, I also want to chime in. What I was just about to write down is while you were talking, it made me realize the organization that I'm a board chair of, we just had a really huge fundraising campaign where we all were tasked with bringing on some individual donors. I haven't done anything with those folks since that campaign ended. Like that's an opportunity as my board chair term ends at the end of this year. could reach out to those folks, make sure that they know that they're connected to whomever it needs to be. So that was an aha for me. I'm like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
I need to do my part.
You could easily do an intro, like, especially if when board members, yay for you, fundraising and bringing people in, but like, can you connect them to somebody else in the organization? And it doesn't have to be the director of development. It could be the manager or the program officer, or depends on the makeup of your organization.
A volunteer manager. Yeah, so many.
Yes, exactly. Another board member, somebody, I don't know. It could be so many different options.
I love that.
I think I like to think of these in like, thank you calls can be spread out, definitely in meetings with donors. Who can you bring along, not just for a solicitation, but for like an update? Who do you bring so they have another person? And then definitely at events, like, can you walk around and introduce, your people to someone else in the organization? So there's always options. Great.
And I think the other thing that you had mentioned around EDs, what we see happen all the time is the ED, not maliciously, but holds so tightly to those relationships that are funders, that when they go, no one knows how to make sense of the fact that the new executive director is struggling. Yes. It's like, well, there literally wasn't a bridge. And I think that it's important to say, like, there's not always going to be an overlap, but you can, to your point, transfer those relationships to someone else in the organization who can then reintroduce and bring that circle closed.
Yeah. And I think, when I come in as an interim, I'm often looking at, okay, where are the gaps in fundraise? Because usually you're looking at prior years, you're looking at what was coming in consistently and now what has not come in, right? And so when you look at those individuals, or sometimes it's foundations or whatever it is, we're looking at like, who knows this person? I'm talking to the board, who knows this person from other staff, who knows this person? And that's really where the strength comes in, because you're like, oh yeah, I can call that person and make a new connection. Because the reality with the transition is those warm introductions don't always happen in that shift, in that short period, especially in fundraising work. They give a 2-week notice and they're out. So, and sometimes the shifts, the transfer is not always harmonious, right? So they might not even have 2 weeks. So I think having those connections can just pay off after the transition happens, because somebody can reach out and say whatever it is, So, but why these other things of knowing what's
you mentioned the web before. And so we live out in the woods and there's lots of spiders. And one of the things that I'm always miraculously drawn to is the strength of a web. Even if one corner is like dangling a mess, someone walked through it, a bird flew through it, the rest of the web's still very intact and still very functional. And that came to mind as you were talking about the web. It can be messy. There can be departures where the transfer of knowledge isn't happening, but there can be ways that you can strengthen that web. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah. And it's such a good visual. I love, you took it to another level. So I love it, because I can see that broken.
Maybe an icky level for some folks. I'm sorry. Don't like spiders.
Yeah, exactly. So let me see. I did want to kind of point out, because these things are obviously helping with the transition, but making sure, like right now, what does that mean? This is like the organizational, like if you're trying to bring someone to maybe give again and again, and also like give more when they are more connected to multiple people, that's happening right now, right? Like they're more likely to give again because they know multiple people within the organization. I know that's for me personally. If I know the people there, I'm more likely to give every year. I don't know if but that's because people give to people, right?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. Number 2 it's this connectivity and visibility. So this is kind of the up and down, but it's knowing what's in motion. So if somebody leaves, everything doesn't just stop, right? So I think what sometimes this looks like is a director of development is managing all the solicitations, all the reporting, all the events or something just alone. And there's not a lot of talk maybe up with the executive director, or sometimes even with the team, for them to be collaborating and talking about what's in process. And so this, sometimes when somebody leaves, then that's where everything falls apart. And the ED usually is like, I don't really know what's happening here, because maybe that person also not talking about the things and meeting regularly. They aren't entering notes into the CRM. They aren't updating the shared drive with what's happening. And when you meet on a regular basis, more people on the team know where to find things. I think that's also a nice pull out from this one. And then the across piece, I talk a lot about donor experience, but like donor experience is not just what happens in development, right? It's what's happening, what marketing is pushing out, what programs is doing. So if you're not meeting regularly with your team across, just to stay, like, to talk about what's coming up on the calendar, I think that's where things start to fall apart too, because then everybody's just pushing out independent things. And I think the big benefit for right now is honestly, for me, the creativity piece, right? You're getting multiple perspectives of the work, and you're also being able to generate fresh ideas. People are invested across the organization and how donors are giving and giving more, hopefully. So that up down connectivity and visibility is so important.
Well, and I think we're also starting to see, and you mentioned at the top of this conversation that individual giving is having a kind of a resurgence or a rebirth. And I think that part of the reason that we need to listen to that piece and what you're talking about is it's so easy for us to say, I don't know a $10,000 donor. I don't have that in my network. It's very common for board members to also feel that way. But you could raise $10,000 by expanding your network and having those conversations. And you're not going to be able to creatively understand who is in your network if you're not having those conversations. So staff, I think about all the time. I'll use the example of the organization I'm a board member for. Staff participated just as much as the board did. Board participated just as much as staff. And some of the staff raised more money than the board members who you would think had the great connections. They opened their mouth and said, here's why this is really important to me. And so that strengthens that web. And so I love that you talked about the creativity and the expansiveness that can happen when we talk to each other inside our teams.
Yeah. And what happens now? So for like, you just did, like, maybe I know a lot of folks locally have been doing these 24-hour matching campaigns or something, like maybe they're doing their own giving day. That's become pretty popular. But then what happens next? Like, are you talking across teams about how you're keeping those folks connected via, regular email communications? Are you going to do a behind the scenes? Can you do a behind the scenes tour? Can you do a roundtable discussion, virtual or in person, where they chat about maybe the topic with the ED? Like, what's happening next, where you can pull from the skills and the resources across the organization to help move those relationships forward, so you can figure out who in that bunch might be a $10,000 donor. Because if you haven't put in the work to kind of move it after that one, maybe $1,000 gift or even $100 gift, like, you won't know who in that bunch could actually give you more, because they're seeing more of what you're doing. They're more inspired by it, and you're realizing it's more of their passion for philanthropy. So that's a great point. It's like, people, the connections are there, but it can't just be a one-off. There has to be something next.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, are we on for number 3?
Yes.
Okay. I know you're going to love this one, which is process and documentation, right? Because this is for everyone. But in fundraising, I think the biggest one is, right, you cannot, I don't know any program that can run without some sort of process and documentation. Right. And I feel like you feel this, like, when somebody goes on vacation, or someone gets sick for an extended period of time, or has to go on medical leave. Like, those things, like, really expose the gap in this, right? Because you don't want to drop the process and all this, like, momentum you're building from these other things when somebody leaves, even short term, right? So it's not just a long-term one, but it's a short term. And I think it's helpful too. Like, I've seen it show up as people feeling like they have to ask questions all the time. Everything's a conversation. Like, you think about all the time that's spent in doing things when there's not some sort of process in place, right? This is in your CRM, this is in your shared drives, having things written down and knowing what is the donor experience for monthly donors? Do we know what happens when they first give? Do we know what they get in 60 days? Do we know what happens? And then I think it allows team members also to take ownership of these areas, right? But then if somebody needs to step in, it's there, right? That's the magic of documentation. So
what would you say Kate, I feel like development and fundraising is one of the departments, mostly I'm talking about in nonprofits, that doesn't really have a built-in backup. So, I mean, bigger organizations might have a bigger development team, but on a program team, typically there's at least one other program person that could take in, step in. And I'm just thinking about someone on a development team taking a leave for whatever reason or departing. Is there a way that kind of prime nonprofits to be ready, besides hiring you as an interim, of course, to make that documentation, that backup system work more smoothly? Or is that just a really big specific challenge of that kind of department?
Yeah, I mean, I think every team I've worked with has struggles with this. So I think what I do when I come in as an interim is help them think about it in chunks. Like, because, like, for example, the big one that I almost have to do with every client is the acknowledgement process. And it feels like such a I don't know, easy thing, right? But for it to be done well, there are layers to it. And you want to make it personal. Like, I always make sure that there's a phone call or some personal touch layered in there. Well, who's doing that, right? Like, who tells who they need to call somebody? All these kind of nuances. It's not just printing a letter and getting out in the mail, but that's part of it too, right? Is like, where do you pull that from? Who gets what? Like, is it an email? Is it a mailed letter? So taking those individual steps of a fundraising process, even for like an event, like how do we announce just general events, not maybe the mega event, but like, how are we inviting people, who gets invited? Oh, here's one that I was just talking to somebody about, is the how do you release information, like, to your donors, right? To have some sort of process built in about who and how you share this, like, who gets a phone call, who gets a personal email, who gets a bulk email, who gets you know what I'm saying? Like, I think sometimes those things too, if that's typed out and agreed upon among the organizational leadership, then you don't have to keep talking about it every single time news breaks or you have a new program development or something. It's like, great, okay, who's going to call XYZ people, and you're going to work on this email and get that out, and we're going to time it, bump, 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 and then you're done. Like, so those things are, I think, critical to any team to be able to operate smoothly. And I feel like nobody has time to sit down and create processes all at once, right? Nobody does. So can you pick one thing and get that one sorted out, and then a next, and then a next, and build it into your calendar? Like, we're going to spend this year every month doing one process, or whatever it is, so that you can have movement.
I'm just thinking too, Katie, we recently brought on some new team members, and I know that this is going to not be a great thing to admit live, but I don't have a lot of my processes documented. I'm working on them, but this process was an opportunity for me to say, like, oh, I could do it now. Like, while I'm onboarding these two folks, I can not only document our onboarding process, but also our client work process. And it's taking time that I would not have otherwise said I had. But there's no time like the present to start, because the opposite option that exists is not great by any means. And it's really detrimental to the work that we're doing and to the people that we are bringing in and who we serve. So I think I just want to underscore that we don't have time to do this. We also don't have time to treat people terribly because we don't have things documented. And just think of, as you're watching this and listening, just think of the impact that it could have to take one of the processes now and document it. It just makes it so much smoother. And I think a lot too, Kate, about PTA, for any of us that have had or do have kiddos in schools where there's a parent-teacher association. I have never known a PTA that has to redo or rethink or rediscover everything. Things are handed to you and said, this is how we do things. This is why we do it this way. This is the vendor we don't use anymore. And so, and PTA is a great example too, because we all leave that. When our kiddos graduate from that grade or that school, we don't get to stick around. And so there's just a good reminder from you. And thank you for that, of like, we don't have time, but you have to do it anyway.
Yeah. And little bits at a time, little chunks. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, those are my three.
I love it.
Relationships, visibility and connectivity, and then process. So
I love it.
Helped folks.
That does help. Kate, I have one question for you too that isn't prepped. What do you see as the biggest barrier when someone knows that they need your services? What do you hear the most, and what's your what's the word that I want? What's your objection? Or how do you, no, that's not what I meant to say. How do you address those objections when you get them?
Yeah, well, I think there's several probably, and they probably cross over to your, ED interim work too. But I think people think that they're going to find somebody quickly. Like they're going to find somebody quickly. We don't want someone to come in and interrupt. For me, this is like interim is project, a partnership by design, like to come in, like I'm not disruptive. I'm actually helpful, like it's not, and it's capacity building for them during this time. Obviously finances is a big one too. People don't want to spend the money. I think, especially over the last 12 to 18 months, people are so nervous about the budgets with all the shifting and funding, which makes a lot of sense. The way I've priced my services and try to approach this with clients is that it's really a match to whatever they were spending before for fundraising leadership. And
Yeah.
that way they, maybe they're not saving that money, they're actually investing it and using what they already had budgeted to help elevate their program and their team. Because usually in these teams that need transition support, the team, you want to make sure those folks stay, that they feel supported during this, that they're not overburdened. I think there's just so many benefit, right, to having somebody just come in and bolster a team and keep things moving. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It's kind of newer though to nonprofit, right? I mean, what are you seeing, Naomi, for interim
Well,
work?
yeah, I think the biggest objections I hear are things like, we didn't budget for this. So to your point of, we don't really have the budget for this and we don't know where to find it. And so I think that for those of you that are listening to this, this is a prime opportunity. Some of you are in the process of budgeting right now. Add it. Look at what your reserves could be used for. You might have a reserves policy that dictates that. I think the other thing, I love that you said that it sometimes feels like a disruption. One of the things that I love about everyone who's coming onto the Departure Lounge is I have a relationship with all of you. There's immense trust in the work that you've done. For some of us, we've done work together. And I think that's the other thing as you're watching this. And if you think, my gosh, we probably do need to have a plan for interim development work. It's like, P.S. Your development director will leave.
Yeah.
It's not a if, it's literally when. And so as you're watching this, just know that any of the folks that are in the Departure Lounge have access to really amazing humans. Katie also has a group of people that if it's not her that's the right fit, she can tell you other people that you can work with. So I think those are the biggest things, is the trust, the disruption, and the money. We also hear quite a bit that they might not be the decision maker. So they may see someone may be watching this and think, oh my gosh, we need this in our organization, and they might not have any impact on the budget. So my recommendation is copy this link or the YouTube link or wherever you're watching this, and you can just send it and say, I heard this great talk and I think we should talk about this at our next meeting. There's ways around that, even if you're not the decision maker or the budget maker.
Yeah. All great points. Yes. Thank
Katie,
you.
where can people find you, Katie, to learn more about what you do and what you offer?
Yeah, LinkedIn is my main spot. You can find me, Katie Mendez. I also have my website, Built to Raise. You can read more about my offerings and how I work with orgs. And yeah, I hope you reach out. I think, Naomi said this is one of the things I love so much about the network of consultants that I've grown over the last few years, is that we all just want to help. Like, if I'm not the right person, I am happy to send you on to someone else who is the right fit. I think we are a generous bunch. And so I've loved being on here and having this conversation with you. And I just really appreciate this time.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, everybody. That's it for today's Departure Lounge. We'll see you next on July 22nd. Have a good one.
Bye.